Is this current cycle just like 2019, where we saw a breakout beyond the macro downtrend into new macro uptrend before seeing a prolonged retracement? Are we going to be seeing this prolonged retracement right now going into the halving, which is this blue line right over here? We're going to be answering that question and a lot more, so subscribe to the channel and let's dive right into the video. This is the 2023 cycle. We've broken beyond the macro downtrend, very similar to what we've seen in the past. Also looking back to as far as 2015, although a key difference here when breaking beyond the macro downtrend, we saw a breakout, pull back for a retest before further upside going into the halving. Now, the thing to mention here with 2019, we broke beyond that macro downtrend before local topping without really looking back for a retest attempt. But we did local top and enter a prolonged retrace going into the halving. So right now in 2023, we've broken the macro downtrend, we've entered this new macro uptrend, but we can't seem to make those new highs for a few months now. And it begs the question whether this is now the beginning of a 2019-like situation, or are we actually going to see a retrace like this for a retest attempt like in 2015? So essentially, is 2023 like 2015, or is it more like 2019? And the question that we should be asking right now with the proximity to the halving is whether or not we're actually now closer to 2019, and we're going to be talking about that as we progress throughout the video. And one of the things to mention here is that we've recently reached one of the major CME gaps, one of the major and most notable CME gaps on the monthly time frame. We've filled this gap right now. We've actually rejected from it quite substantially on two separate occasions, forming a bearish divergence that we spoke about in previous videos. So this major CME gap on the monthly time frame has been filled, and that's the only CME gap that we can see here on the monthly time frame if we just look to price action dating back to even 2018. And if you'd like to learn more about CME gaps, check out the video in the top right hand corner. But we have to focus on the question at hand, and that's: where has Bitcoin local topped prior to its halving events in the past, and can this inform us when it comes to the 2023 local top? Because if we zoom in here first to the 2012 halving event right over here, that local top before a sizable retracement for multiple weeks, that occurred around 322 days before the halving. If we focus now on the 2016 halving event, then we'll see that the local top occurred over here and actually never really broke beyond that local top for many weeks before we actually got very close to the halving. So this was the local top prior to the halving, and we saw that occur 252 days before the halving in the 2015-2016 period. So this is now 2019, and you can see a clear local top here at 13,900 in June 2019, 322 days before the halving. So the question here is, has Bitcoin local topped for the year? And if we just say, for instance, that Bitcoin halving number 2, 252 days before the halving being that local top, then we end up with this period where end of August is where we should have topped out. And of course, if we say 322 days like we saw with the previous halvings, then mid-June is where we should have topped out. And it's really interesting to see how these two price points are quite close to that general range, the general range being this red box right over here. Historically speaking, the local top is in right now, time-wise, relative to the Bitcoin halving at least. And it's really interesting to see how we see a 322 days local top prior to the halving for Bitcoin halving number 3, and a similar amount of days prior to the November halving as well, 322 days. So generally, the range is up to 322 days, and we have this range right over here. So technically, we have local topped in terms of the time relative to the Bitcoin halving event. So it all comes down to the question whether or not we are in a 2019-like situation. And the answer to that question is most probably we are, because looking at this history and time to the halving, we've topped out according to the historically recurring themes in Bitcoin's price action. So in that respect, when it comes to 2019, we might be quite similar at this point in time, especially if we lose the double top formation that we're developing right now on the smaller timeframes, on the weekly timeframe. So if this is indeed the weekly, or rather the local top, then we might be entering a period of downside price action going in to closer to the halving, going into the new year of 2024. So we could see some sort of retracement. But does that mean that we could see a retest of the macro downtrend, just like we saw in 2015? Because this downtrend is declining over time, it's going to be much more difficult over time for Bitcoin to revisit this downtrend and retest it as a new support. So the closer we get to the halving, the more this downtrend runs away from price action, the more difficult it is for price action to actually capture and retest this downtrend as a new support. Instead, we might have to find a base somewhere in the 20K region, for instance, or slightly sub 20K region, but we might not actually retest this macro downtrend like we did in this 2015 cycle. And even then, this was a typical textbook technical breakout where we see a breakout followed by a month of pullback and then stability followed by trend continuation towards the upside. Whereas it's been a few months since we've broken beyond this macro downtrend. It's been many months since we've broken beyond that macro downtrend, and in the absence of a retest, this no longer needs a retest of some sort. Sometimes breakouts don't need retests, and we've seen that in this 2019 breakout that a retest wasn't necessary here, and then we got a retracement which was, of course, nowhere close to this macro downtrend. So that's something I'm going to be expecting. That's going to be more like 2019, where we see a slow bleed of a retrace going into the 20K region as we get closer to the halving event, never really getting close to this macro downtrend. That's something that 2023 resembles in terms of its current price predicament when it comes to 2019. So the question at this point in time is, will Bitcoin validate this double top formation? We're currently seeing lots of downside wicking like we've seen before right over here, but we only needed one downside wick below this level before springboarding towards the upside. Whereas here we're having 3 upside or at least downside wicks and struggling to still maintain this level even in the 4th week of trying to retest this 26K level as a support. So will this double top actually validate a weekly close below 26K? Would be necessary to flip this 26K level into a resistance, and once that happens, we'll see downside continuation and a confirmation of this double top. And I speak more about this double top in yesterday's video, so feel free to check that one out in the top right hand corner. Subscribe to the channel and I'll speak to you in that one. Speak to you soon.